What's up guys, my name is Dean, aka the Blue Crusader, and welcome back to another Minecraft mod showcase. This one is going to be on none other than the magical dimension, the Twilight Forest. This is a really great mod with some interesting bosses, locations, structures, and a really great progression system on how to get started in the mod. So let me show you how to get to the dimension and all the features of the Twilight Forest. For anyone who loves magical mods, you can check out my other magic mod showcases, which will be linked in the description below, and you can check out more mod showcases on my channel. Without further ado, let's jump into the dimension. So the portal for the Twilight Forest is very similar to a nether portal, but it doesn't stand upwards vertically. It kind of sits horizontally. So let me explain this. This might sound a little bit confusing. So imagine this 2x2 plot being the nether portal, the purple portal, right? So make a 2x2 plot in the dirt, and then we need to fill this with water. So obviously being in creative mode, this is a really easy process, but you want to fill this with water. So fill this up with water source blocks, which should most likely be the second step that you do. Now you can do this first, I believe, but I'm just going to go ahead and going to drain all this water first just to show you the process. So make a 2x2 hole. This is where the portal will go, and this is where we're going to jump into the dimension in a few moments. But instead of surrounding the portal with obsidian or some kind of other block like most portals, the Twilight Forest is a forest, right? So everything's vegetation. So we're going to surround this with lots of different flowers. So this could be a mixture of things like ferns and flowers and plants. It really doesn't matter as long as it's vegetation and plants, okay? Just whatever makes sense. So let's just spawn ourselves a few variations of random flowers that we can place around this portal. Now, the best thing for this is just to go to decoration blocks. This is where you'll find like all the flowers and things. So you can find anything like ferns, pink tulips, white tulips, all these different colors of plants, mushrooms, for an example. Basically, any kind of plants we can place around this portal is going to suffice, okay? So we can just go around and we can place a few of these and just go around the portal. And as long as it's listed as a crop or a plant, it should work. Now, normal mushrooms, obviously, you won't be able to place around the portal unless you have mycelium. So let's just go around and place all the stuff. So this should make sense, right? Because we've gone around with all these plants. So then you want to fill the middle of the portal on all four sides with a bucket of water, because this needs to be a water source block. Then the final thing to initiate the full sequence of the portal being formed in Twilight Forest is you're going to need a diamond. Now, a diamond is pretty valuable, okay? So make sure you don't waste this, but what you want to do is you want to take the diamond that you've collected at some point in survival mode, and you just want to toss it inside the 2x2 square of water, and it should summon some kind of lightning strike like what just happened, and boom, it creates a portal. Now, if you're in survival mode, you may wish to back away slightly when creating the portal because it may hurt you. Not quite sure about that, but you don't want to take the chance, okay? So it's best just to be careful. So now we've created our Twilight Forest portal, and the lightning bolt has striked it to show that it's fully summoned. And it appears like a nether portal that we can go ahead and just step inside. So that's the first steps of arriving at the Twilight Forest and building the portal, which is the first step to beginning in the dimension. Now, when we arrive at the Twilight Forest, you're going to need to bring some equipment, okay? So make sure you have some things on hand. Now, you're going to at least need some food items. So I've gone ahead and given myself 2 golden apples, a whole stack of cooked pork chop, some torches, because we're going to need that to explore, and a full set of armor, which in our case is going to be netherite, because we're actually playing it on 1.16.5, which is kind of overkill, because the Twilight Forest has been around for a long time, so you definitely don't need netherite, but just make sure you have a full armor set, because you're going to want to have a pretty good set equipped before we go in here. And unlike a nether portal, the Twilight Forest portal is going to teleport us instantaneously to the dimension. You're not going to have to wait a few minutes for it to charge up. It's going to port us straight into the dimension. So make sure we have all of the gear ready and our sword before we jump in. Now, we're going to jump into the dimension and boom, it's going to put us on a loading screen and we go straight inside and we're kind of just thrown inside the dimension. Now, the best thing to do here is to kind of look around and gauge what's happening, okay? What's the surroundings? Where are we? And in our case, it spawned us deep in the forest where it's extremely dark, so I already know that there's probably going to be some threats around here. But you could go ahead and you could also pause your game and kind of assess around what's happening. For an example, this is really where things are more so biome dependent. So if you read on the wiki, it does tell you, depending on which biome you're in, it will be more or less dangerous. But now we're inside the biome, inside the dimension, which is the dense forest. So you can see if you press F3 in Minecraft, it will tell you exactly which biome you're in. So currently this is the dense forest. So this is the first biome we've stumbled upon. And this is a really nice place because you can see the trees are extremely tall. You have these small, nimble, thin trees where the bark kind of looks very similar to glowstone. And then you have absolutely massive trees which are thick over here. So it's going to be quite overwhelming when you first step into the dimension. And when you first enter it, you're going to already see quite a few structures almost instantly. I mean, for an example, we see this house over here. We see kind of like an arena looking thing in the distance and huge trees. So you're going to be confused what exactly to do at first, but don't be too overwhelmed. Now, one mod which I would really recommend if you're just testing out mods like I am right now, because I am in creative mode, and I'm not sure if you can use this in survival or not, because personally I've never tested it, but you'll see in most of my mod showcases, I'm using something called Nature's Compass, okay? This is literally a lifesaver. I love this mod, and it's been around since way before Minecraft added the search biome command, so this is what I always use to teleport to biomes really easily to show you guys, and it's really nice to teleport around biomes. So you'll see on F3 it says we are in the oak savanna, so if I type in savanna it will show us the Twilight Forest oak savanna, and I can teleport to each biome. So this is a really nice way to actually showcase everything. Now the first biome which I'm going to show you, okay, is actually the Twilight Glacier. Okay, so this is called the Glacier or the Twilight Glacier, and if you spawn on top of some ice, then the chances are that you've spawned on top of a glacier, okay? And this actually spawns quite high above the ground. You'll see in the distance, this is bordering on a different biome, for an example. You can see basically a snowy forest below, and the glacier is one huge big block of ice which kind of towers up to the sky. And this is a biome which are usually several dozen blocks tall, and you can see these colonies of penguins which kind of inhabit the glaciers, and we can walk around and we can see them. And these things are pretty cute, and they're super tiny. Now, this guy doesn't deserve it, but I'm just going to punch him off. But you'll see that, fortunately for him, he kind of hovers down and flaps his wings, so they don't actually die from fall damage, which is really cool. But there's tons of these penguins which you'll find scattered around. So if you spawn on ice and see a lot of penguins, you're actually in a Twilight Glacier biome. Now, the best way, obviously, to get off a glacier is just to build down. I'd recommend building a staircase if you want to get down safely, because you're going to be at a pretty high point when around here, okay? And death by fall damage is very realistic when you're on a glacier because it's very high up in the sky. So that's going to be a problem and a big risk when we're around here, okay? It's not the best starting place to spawn. It's flat, but there is an upside, the fact that it's peaceful and there's just penguins. So there's very little threat here for the most part, okay? So it is an okay place to spawn in terms of danger, but you need to make sure you have blocks to get down, and you need to be very wary of your surroundings. Especially because, obviously, on ice, if you use any kind of ground lighting items like a torch, it will melt the ice, okay? So it's not very convenient to place torches down here, and it's not very convenient to build in general on ice. One thing which is interesting, okay, is when you're next to glaciers, you may see this gigantic structure, okay? So let's go through this structure, because this structure is part of the glacier biome, so it only makes sense to explore it, right? So this is what's called the Aurora Palace. This is the palace where one of the bosses called the Snow Queen resides in, okay? And you'll find the Snow Queen at the very top of the Aurora Palace. So she's the boss you'll find at the very helm of this structure, and it's basically like a huge rainbow-like set of blocks which tower up to the sky. So if you see an Aurora Borealis in the sky, which is basically just like the Northern Lights for an example, this is kind of what this building's trying to simulate. So this looks really cool, and you'll be able to see it from a mile away because it's a very unique structure. It's recommended that you've definitely killed previous bosses like the Ur-Ghast before you reach this stage and attempt it. This is quite far along in the progression system, but I just want to show you the Aurora Palace because this is a really interesting structure. So basically you go inside and it's kind of like a labyrinth. You'll see all these stone columns, and you'll hear very strange sounds of like ice and glass inside, and you'll need to illuminate things. You'll find mobs inside, like these ice mobs, and obviously if you have great gear like a netherite or diamond sword, you can dispatch of these guys pretty easily, okay? And they just drop snowballs. But finding a way inside the palace and getting to the top can be a struggle. So we're going to go around and we're going to try go to the top of the Aurora Palace. Now, luckily for me, since I'm in creative mode, I cannot obviously go inside all these nooks and crannies and crevices and show you a few of the mobs inside. For an example here, we have a Snow Guardian. So you have a few different mob types and these guys will drop different types of loot. So some of them will drop armor pieces, snowballs, and the steps are quite interesting, okay? They have these funny steps where you basically have to do Minecraft parkour. So if you've played on parkour servers, this is going to be a treat for you guys, and it's going to be fairly easy because it's not very complex. But you'll find things like crates inside with enchants, fireflies, all these items from the mod. And you'll have to break through and go onto multiple stories and floors inside the palace to reach the top. And you'll basically have constant waves of enemies whilst exploring. This enemy is called the Ice Core. So these guys, they're fairly weak, and we can jump around these blocks. And basically the purpose is it's kind of like a dungeon in a tower form. So you're going to keep fighting through these multiple layers until you reach the top. And these things are absolutely huge, okay? And even the mobs spawn on the outside layers and on the actual roof, not just in the interior. And when you finally get to the top and go to the Ice Queen, that's going to be where you can obviously do the fight. It can be quite confusing because there are multiple towers in this structure, and when you go to the top of the tallest towers, the Ice Queen isn't necessarily in the top of those towers, but each of these towers have some really great loot which you don't want to miss inside, guys. Inside you'll find armor pieces which can be dyed, like these Arctic legging armor pieces, this ice bow which is already enchanted, which is pretty powerful, and different artifact weapons which are going to be really useful when exploring and playing. So you don't want to miss out on the loot in these Aurora Palace structures because it's obviously extremely lucrative. And you can see it's not just one tower, each and every tower has some pretty crazy loot. Like we saw the ice bow, now we have an ender bow. So make sure you look out for the chests. So I'm just going to kind of show you and give you an idea of what everything looks like. So inside here, this seems to be the main tower, okay? And this goes up very high up. So I'm going to kind of explore, and I'm going to try and find the Ice Queen so we can go to a lair and I can showcase the boss. Now, when you find in the Snow Queen, remember that in the Twilight Forest, there's a progression system, okay? So if you haven't previously slain the few bosses before in the progression tree, you're not going to actually be able to find the current boss. For an example, the Snow Queen is not the first boss you have to defeat, so she doesn't spawn in a structure unless you've defeated the previous bosses in a list. Now you can do this by obviously changing different game rules. So we could type in game rule TF enforced progression and then type false, and then basically it sets the enforced progression system to false, meaning that any bosses you can find will spawn despite not defeating the bosses required beforehand. So if you haven't defeated the Ur-Ghast for an example, typing in this command will force spawn the Snow Queen inside a structure like this, because the reason why I couldn't find her is because I haven't slain the bosses beforehand. So this can be a good fix if you just want to test the bosses out and you don't have to defeat the ones beforehand. When you create a new world, you can also go into game rules, and when you go down, you can go to world updates and Twilight Forest progression, change it to false to disable it. So we're now in a brand new Glacier, and you can see we've already found another Aurora Palace because these spawn extremely close to basically every Glacier biome. This is because Glacier biomes are not usually that huge, so they don't really span for as long as other biomes do. They're not very large and wide biomes, but they are slightly a little bit more rarer. Now you can see we have the boss health bar, the Snow Queen, at the top of this tower because I've disabled the progression system. So now we can obviously access the boss early. So I'm just going to mine down and break through until we go into the boss room. And here is the Snow Queen boss. Okay, so this is the Snow Queen boss. And this is a mob which you find inside the Aurora Palace. And she's located at the very top of the Glacier biome inside the Aurora Palace. So at the very peak of the palace, we can find the Snow Queen. Now, she gives off snow particles, as you can see when she flies around, and she floats on a plane of ice, so she's basically on a flying iceberg. Now, before we engage in combat, you should definitely follow the progression system. I've just disabled it so I can easily showcase the bosses, but if you defeat the bosses beforehand, then not only will you get her to spawn, but you'll also get enough items in order to defeat her a little bit easier. If you do skip ahead, she will actually affect the player with slowness, and she'll unleash a heavy blizzard over the entire biome. reducing visibility when you fight her. So there is some downsides to skipping ahead, guys. It's not a great idea. Obviously, when we attack her, you can see she's losing health pretty quickly with the netherite sword. She's not exactly that powerful in terms of health. When we initiate a real fight with her, if we go into survival mode, she's a lot tougher than she seems, okay? So we're going to initiate the boss fight, and you can see since we skipped ahead, she's basically done this thing where things are not very visible. Okay, and she's flying above the room on this iceberg, and we can't even access her, and we can't see very well. So like I said before, skipping ahead means that your vision is going to be considerably blurred. Now, she's going to do a few things in the boss fight, which is going to be confusing. She's going to summon different mobs to fight for her. She's summoning this bear to fight for her, and she's summoning all these ice mobs to fight for her too. Okay, so she is a pretty annoying boss to fight. Now, if we go straight into creative mode, the mobs that she summons, they will die out, and it'll allow us to kill them. But in survival mode, it's not going to let me hurt any of them. Now, the best way to actually fight her when you're actually in a fight, though, is to use a bow and arrow, okay? Because she is obviously a ranged mob, and she's going to be in the sky most of the time, so she's mostly going to be inaccessible to you. So it's best to shoot her down with arrows while she's floating ahead, otherwise you're not going to be able to touch her. But any ranged projectiles that actually miss the boss itself and hit the iceberg below it will deflect back on the player. So if we shoot this, you can see that the arrows actually deflect back onto me. They don't always hit me, but they don't hit the boss. It takes a direct hit to the boss to actually damage her. Now, once the Snow Queen gets to around half health, she'll begin using a Frost Breath attack, and this sends a laser-like snow beam at the player. Okay, so this is pretty dangerous. So let me go back into survival mode, and now she's gonna go into a really annoying form, okay? And I can't see anything whatsoever. So she's gonna summon all of the annoying mobs, and she's gonna start breaking all the ice around her, and we're not gonna be able to see a thing. So this is why you shouldn't skip the progression, guys, okay? So let me just defeat the boss, just in creative mode like a noob, just so I can show you what she actually drops. Okay, so let's just get her down really quickly, so she doesn't have all those annoying mobs around her. And boom, we defeated the Snow Queen. So you'll see on the floor, she drops a few different things. She's dropped a few different snowballs, some packed ice items, and this interesting new ranged item, which is actually really good. This is called the Seeker Bow, okay? Sometimes she drops a tri-bow, sometimes she drops the Seeker Bow, and she's dropped the Snow Queen trophy. So just like Terraria, for an example, if you've played that game, when you defeat a boss, they drop trophies and you can put them on your wall. It's no different in the Twilight Forest, but they're more so like mob heads. So if you defeat a boss, they'll drop the head of that boss as an item so we can put them on the wall in our house. So this is a really cool thing that Twilight Forest has. So this is the first boss that I've covered, just only because I've covered the Glacier biome first. Now we're going to move on to the next biome. The next biome we're going to is the Fire Swamp. So let's jump into the Fire Swamp biome and explore this one. So the Fire Swamp is a biome with reddish grass, which is indicated by all of the terrain being red. Now, it's a dark red hue and color, and you'll find things like lava all around it, hence the name of Fire Swamp. And this lava spreads onto the trees around, and you can have forest fires, so it's not the safest place, okay? And you may see dragon-like creatures nearby, which indicates that you're nearby a Hydra lair, okay? So fire swamps are not the safest biomes inside the Twilight Forest. Fire can ricochet off these lava pools, set trees on fire, and also attack the player. So make sure to stay away from any of these fire pits and any large hills inside the biome too. The large hills, the reason why you stay away from those is because those indicate where a Hydra lair is, okay? So if you're wandering around one of these fire biomes and you see a large mound, then you found a Hydra lair. But don't worry about these small smoke eruptions coming from the ground, because for the most part, these aren't actually going to hurt you or cause any problems. One of the bosses you're going to seek out is obviously the Hydra. These are extremely dangerous, especially if you don't yet have the equipment to tackle them, so it can make them extremely tough, a large challenge, and something you just don't want to do early in the progression. Now, if you were wondering what I meant by the large mounds or hills inside a fire swamp, well, let's take a look. This is the hill I was talking about, okay? So this is what a Hydra lair is in the Twilight Forest. And you can see over here, we have the three-necked and three-headed Hydra, which is basically like a reptilian boss. Very similar to a few different other mods. I did actually cover a dragon mod before, which was the Ice and Fire mod, which also had a Hydra boss. So it's very similar to the Hydra from Ice and Fire, but these guys don't spawn in the swamp. they spawn in the fire swamp. And they spawn in this huge mountain hill peak inside, which kind of has a cavern with these stalactites and stalagmites inside. And sometimes they're illuminated with glowstone, and you'll find ores inside. And inside, you'll find the three-headed Hydra, which is another boss from the Twilight Forest. And unfortunately, the Twilight Forest is an extremely dark biome, so it's quite hard to show you some of these things close up because it's hard to see. But this is what the Hydra looks like, and this is what a Hydra lair looks like too. So Hydra lairs are basically these large mounds inside the biomes, okay? And the reason why these are so lucrative, like I said, is they do actually have useful materials inside. So redstone, glowstone, lapis lazuli, you'll also find iron, gold, and sometimes even diamonds inside. And they'll basically be flooded with water, so you'll have to kind of wade through a little bit of water. But then in the middle is just a cave. But they don't have any spawners or loot chests. But in order to access the resources inside when you're in survival mode, you do first have to defeat the Hydra, okay? Because even though the Hydra's sitting on some pretty nice treasures, for an example, looking up here, there's some pretty large veins of ore, which I'd love to acquire, but the Hydra's hovering over it, and he's not going to let me take that before we defeat him. Now, in the Twilight Forest, Hydras have a ton of health, okay? These guys are a pretty big challenge. Now, I'll attack him, and you can see when we attack him, he's barely losing a single bar of health. It takes 3 to 4 hits for his health bar to even go down. And they have some pretty dangerous attacks like Fire Breath, but if you can conquer the Hydra, it's a really rewarding challenge. And the drops are really nice. So let's just take a look at the drops for an example. So they drop Fiery Blood, which we can use for this fiery armor, which burns attackers, so that's a really nice armor set you're going to need later in the game. They drop Hydra Chops, which is a good temporary food source, and you also get the minerals from the lair, so defeating them is actually a really good feat which you want to do. Now, since you've sat through the biome being extremely dark all this time, I'm going to give your eyes a little bit of a break, okay? So I've turned on the full brightness mode, so this is as bright as I can make Minecraft. It was on moody brightness before, but you don't want to play the Twilight Forest on moody, okay? Because it literally does make things moody. It just makes things horrible to see. So for the purpose of the video, I've made things extremely light. Now we can see the Hydra in its full-formed glory. So, as you can see, when we shoot arrows at the boss, arrows just completely rebound off this guy. So ranged weapons are useless unless you hit the core of the boss in the center of its body near its abdomen. So if you hit it around its center, then you can damage it. But if you hit it around the head and neck, it really depends where you hit it for it to rebound. So certain areas of the body will be devoid of being able to be hit by arrows. So make sure you hit it in the correct places. For melee weapons, you do have to go entirely right close up to the thing, so it can be kind of hard. Now we're going to move on to the Mushroom Forest biome. The Mushroom Forest is a really nice biome inside the Twilight Forest dimension, and it's something which is a little bit more easy on the eyes, because it's just full of lots of trees and mushrooms. If you see mycelium around, or you see giant mushroom structures, chances are you found a deep mushroom forest, or just a normal mushroom forest structure. Now, with Silk Touch, you can also go around and collect all this mushroom if you want to, but there's not really much danger in this biome. It's actually a pretty refreshing biome. This is just a really good place to come to just to acquire mushrooms really easily, so if you want to get mushrooms, you can just head to the mushroom forest and get them really easily because they're in abundance all around here. You can just break these gigantic mushrooms and just get a ton of them to make things like mushroom stew, so this is a really nice place to come to. These are even larger than the normal vanilla standard mushrooms too, so it's a really great source of easy food. So if you're struggling for hunger or you need food inside the Twilight Forest, the mushroom biome is really useful for this. And there's also mushrooms on the ground too, not just the giant ones. There's also the Twilight Clearing. The Twilight Clearing is interesting to say the least. If you don't see trees directly nearby or above you, there may be a labyrinth below you, because we're in the Twilight Clearing right now, and clearing is basically like a huge plains biome, which if it's surrounded by different forest biomes, you may still see trees, but the biome itself doesn't have anything inside. It's pretty bare, but you can see there's a lot of wildlife around, like sheep, We have these little cute birds around here which make sounds, so it's still quite a refreshing biome to go through. You may be tempted to explore these hills nearby. Now, I'd recommend not to, because this is also where you may find labyrinths too. Labyrinths are very dangerous at the start of the game, and going near these hills will give you quick access to those labyrinths, which may not be something you want to do straight away. But the clearing is a good place to get set up and gather different resources, and harvest things like wool and meat from all these different mobs over here. This biome is also not dark, so if you're playing on a lower brightness level like I was before, this is probably one of the biomes you want to go to where you can actually see. There's also plenty of room here to build a base in and expand without being blocked by trees or too much vegetation, so it's a really good starter biome and place you want to set up shop in. And it's surrounded by so many different cave systems which are entirely open, so the generation here is actually really nice. If we just go into one of these caves, you can see we have some pretty interesting blocks inside. We have these roots that appear like chains, and these cave mouths that basically go on down really deep, really far into the biome itself. So you can see the deeper we get into the cave, the further we go down, and you'll find yourself getting lost in here and getting attacked by a lot of different mobs. So things are pretty dangerous if you choose to explore all these huge hills, and that's why I'd recommend not to do so. The next one is the Dark Forest, not to be confused with the standard vanilla Minecraft forest, because they're two different things and they have different precipitation and biome temperature. So the Dark Forest has spawned us above the trees, because the height of this biome is actually really tall. The trees are extremely tall, and just like its vanilla counterpart, it basically blocks all of the potential light coming into the biome, so you won't be able to see anything when we're underneath these trees. And if you were playing on moody brightness like I was at the beginning portion of the video, it's going to be really horrible for your eyesight. So this is one of those biomes where bringing torches is extremely important. Now, if everything's absolutely pitch black and all you can see is mushrooms and toadstools, go back because you're inside the Dark Forest. Now, if this is the first biome which you happen to be situated in and fall upon, you should just go back through the portal and make another one, because this is a dangerous biome. This is extremely dangerous. This biome is dangerous because it's home to a few different mobs which are really scary. Okay, and I'm going to show you those mobs right now, just as an example. Why is the Dark Forest dangerous? Well, you have the King Spider for a start, which is a gigantic spider which are mounted by skeletal druids. If you have a phobia of spiders, aka arachnophobia, you're not going to want to see these guys. Then there's mist wolves, which are gigantic hellhounds, which are going to ambush you inside this pitch black biome, so be prepared to jump out of your rib cage. Basically, your heart's going to have a fun time. And then we have skeletal druids, which are the druids which mount the spiders, who just linger around the biome. So there's a lot of nasty mobs like this, which are extremely powerful and deadly. And along with this, you may be nearby a dark tower structure, which is situated around here too. Dark towers are found in the very center of dark forest biomes. Now, to locate a dark tower, you want to go to the very top of the dark forest biome, so basically above the canopy, and then keep flying until you find a dark tower. Now, this is what the dark tower looks like, okay? And this basically goes above the clouds, and they're massive structures found in the very center of the biome. And these are home to some pretty unique mobs, okay? Basically undead mobs like ghasts and ghouls, and they're made out of this special tower wood set of planks and special wood which are from the dark forest. But inside, they have some traps and some spooky blocks like vanishing and reappearing blocks, and a few different surprises which are deadly, okay? But along with this, they have some pretty interesting treasures inside and lucrative things which you're going to want to actually acquire. So these can be quite nice biomes to actually explore, just to find the dark tower as well. Now, dark towers are very dangerous and are quite complex to navigate, because not only do they have tons of traps in, but they have a lot of hostile mobs inside too, and all these gas flying around. So not very welcoming to any would-be explorers who want to actually find what's inside. Now, not only is there a fight inside this structure, but you can climb the main sections of the tower and unlock the doors of locked vanishing blocks. There's usually 3 different locked doors. The 4 tower keys that open each of these doors are hidden around the smaller segments which are branching off of the main tower, which you can see right now. So if you want to get the 4 tower keys, this is where you'll find them. And finding all 4 keys to a door will often require some careful exploration. There's some reappearing anti-building mazes, builder puzzles, and parkour challenges which you'll run into when you explore this structure, and other nefarious traps. Also, this is a big risk of falling off, okay, because this is really tall and is very high up, and there's not really much protection other than a few fences at certain parts to keep you from slipping off, so you've got to be really careful here. But when you reach the very top of this dark forest, dark tower, this is where the player will have to defeat the boss, the Ur-Ghast. So the Ur-Ghast is the final boss which you're going to be looking to defeat in the progression when inside the dark forest, inside the dark tower, okay? And you can see here, the boss is extremely loud, okay? And you can hear it extremely far away. The boss is so loud that I'm currently muting the sound just so you don't hear it too much. But this is what the Ur-Ghast looks like, and it will spawn as soon as you are in the proximity of the mob spawner itself, which I just showed you, and it will hover above the tower and fly around, basically menacing the top of the tower. Now the Ur-Ghast is a pretty tough boss, okay? Flies high above the tower and it's difficult to damage with anything other than a ranged weapon, and its main form of attack is shooting fireballs at the player, just like the ones that you encounter from Ghast inside the Nether. So this is a ranged mob which is absolutely huge, and you can also reflect back these flame attacks at the Ghast to deal pretty high damage. So you can knock back its flame attacks just like you can with Ghast in the Nether. So that's the main form of damage along with a ranged weapon which you want to do to actually hurt this thing. And look how big this guy's tears are. They're absolutely huge. Now these tears that are released when the boss cries, like I just showed you, do damage the player if they fall on top of you from above, okay? And this acts basically like an instant damage potion. So if you let these fall on you, it's going to do a lot of increased damage. But when you defeat them, the loot chest which drops from the boss will give you an Ur-Ghast trophy, some fiery blood, like what the Hydra dropped, to make that really nice armor, and an item called Carmenite as well. We're now in another one of my favorite biomes in the Twilight Forest, which is the Enchanted Forest. So if the foliage cycles between different shades, so as you can see over here, we have a few different shades of green, purple, and blue, for an example, like a multicolored tier set of leaves, you'll notice that you're probably inside the Enchanted Forest. And if this is the first biome which you happen to appear in after jumping through that teleporter, you're pretty lucky, okay? Because you found an Enchanted Forest biome. And if you look around for a bit, you may actually see a special location, which is a quest grove. Now, I'm going to try and show you this location in a few moments, because there is actually one over here, so we can actually run over to this, because we've been pretty lucky with locating it. Now, here is the special structure, which is a quest grove, okay? So this is kind of like a druid looking thing. There's a giant bighorn sheep inside here, okay? And this is kind of like a druid spirit animal, but it's not hostile, so you don't have to worry about this guy attacking you, okay? These are just animals. Now, as you can see, if you go back to the overworld after finding one of these, try and collect one of each color of wool, okay? And once you find one of each, you can head back to this quest grove and feed it to the quest ram, and you'll receive a really nice reward to jumpstart your adventure. So as you can see, I can right click on this ram, give it yellow, lime, and pink wool, and I'm going to give it literally every single type of wool and show you what happens. White wool, orange, magenta, and it has to be every different color, guys, okay? Let's give him some light blue wool, and some grey wool, and some light grey wool, and you can see he has the coloured wool already stacking alongside his back. So this shows the progression of what's happening, and it shows which wools you've given to him. And he will also follow you if you have wool out, okay? And you can see he's now got these coloured strips indicating the different shades that we've just fed to him. So now we've nearly fed him all of it, so we'll give him some cyan wool, some purple wool, and some blue wool. And we'll give him some black wool, some brown wool, some green wool, and some red wool. So now his body's basically extended and he has tons of walls, and he's dropped a few different items below him, okay? And we've got this achievement called Consummate Bars. Give the questing ram what it is missing. So we've fed this guy tons of coloured walls and we've stretched him out like a sausage dog. This is actually pretty funny. But he dropped a few items to us. You can see he gave us a block of diamond, block of gold, lapis, emerald. He gave us some pretty awesome things like this block of iron. So he gave us tons of ores. So it may not be worth it for you to do that, but that's like a nice little Easter egg that you can do and have a little reward when visiting the Enchanted Forest. One interesting thing you can acquire when you're exploring caves is something called Torchberries, okay? So these Torchberry plants are usually found inside caves or inside small mounds with dirt. And they can only hang off certain blocks, like dirt for an example, but when you harvest them, they'll drop torchberries. And the reason why these are lucrative is because in the place of coal, we can actually use these alongside sticks to make ourselves some torches, and it'll give us 5 torches per stack. So it's basically a way to get torches in more abundance without using coal. So these are really nice plants you'll find when you're exploring caverns underground, and they're really useful. Sometimes inside the overworld of the Twilight Forest, there are these skeleton druid houses, which you'll find quite a few of them as you explore. And inside they'll have spawners, which spawn the skeleton druids, which I showed you that spawn in the Dark Forest also. Now these can be quite dangerous because, like I said, these mobs are quite powerful. And these houses are made of mossy cobblestone with a roof of wooden stairs, and they usually have a fireplace and chimney inside of them made of bricks. But the druids can actually poison you, so you need to really be careful when you fight them. But if you've got a keen eye, you can notice underneath this sideboard, you can also find a chest which has some pretty nice loot inside too for you to take. Now in the Twilight Forest, you'll also sometimes find hollowed hills which spawn around the world. Now this particular one has a huge tree on top of it, which doesn't really look like anything would be under it normally. It just looks like a normal cave in a mound in the ground. But if we go a little bit closer and explore this tree right here, and we drift underground and mine down a little bit with this space that I've already created before, you can see this small entryway with tons of these spines of ores inside. So this is a really lucrative place to find ores, but there's a ton of mobs down here too. And this is called a hollow hill. And in Twilight Forest, these are hills which are hollow and contain certain treasures inside. They look like a perfectly round shape, so it's very easy to distinguish them from normal naturally spawning hills. So it's pretty artificial that you saw from the outside. And inside there's some various different mobs we can find, okay? We have zombies, mob spawners, we have these evil goblin looking guys inside. These are called red cap goblins. So these are mobs that you can see spawn inside along with these beetle bugs. So there's a lot of enemies which we can find below here too, along with the standard skeletons and cave blocks. So there's going to be a lot of mobs you have to dispatch of in here. But if you can slay mobs and survive, you're going to find a ton of loot inside here. Tons of randomized loot inside all these chests, which you can obviously obtain. Okay, so this is a really lucrative place to find tons of ore and high rewards, but the ratio of reward to risk is extremely high, so you need to be really careful. There's also ruins which you can find around the Twilight Forest. These usually don't really contain much. They're just here to kind of spruce up the world and make it less boring, but these are just basic structures which consist of spires of mossy cobblestone with wooden floor or dirt floor. Sometimes, if you dig 1 to 2 blocks below these, you can find a secret room containing a chest with various loot inside them. But this isn't always the case, as with every single one of them, okay? So not all of these have a secret room underneath, but some of them do. So if you dig underneath all of these structures of the ruins, sometimes you can be lucky enough to get some extra loot. But for the most part, most of these are just decorational and they're pretty dead in terms of finding anything here. One very interesting place which you'll find inside the Twilight Forest is the Naga Courtyard. This is a battleground of a Naga, and it's made up of stone, mossy bricks and Naga stone, and if you come close enough, the Naga itself will spawn in the middle, and this is a snake-like boss which kind of meanders alongside it. So if you've played the Snakes game on some of the original games consoles, this is basically what this emulates. It's kind of emulating that, but inside a mythological form in Minecraft. So these are 80 by 80 size arenas, which I think has changed in some of the more recent Twilight Forest updates because the structures and bosses have received kind of like a facelift since the old versions. But there's a boss spawner in the center, which you might be able to spot, where the Naga actually comes out of, and this will then pursue and destroy the player where possible. Now, Naga stone as a block can only be found inside this structure. So if you're looking for Naga stone, this is the only area inside this dimension where you can obtain it, guarded by this Hydra inside. Okay, so this makes it a somewhat rare material to obtain, but You'll also find a lot of mossy stone inside the walls of the courtyard too. If you're outside the range of this courtyard, the Naga cannot be damaged, so the challenge of this boss is you have to actually be within the walls if you want to do any damage to him. Now this is the Naga, just to kind of give you an outline of his health bar, and we can actually damage him quite a bit, okay? So with a netherite sword, if we chase this guy, we can damage him quite a lot, but he does toss and turn and move around a lot quickly. Now the more you damage him, the slower his movement speed will get, so it makes it a little bit easier to defeat him. But it's kind of going to be a little bit of a cat and mouse game with chasing this guy to actually fully defeat him, okay? So you're going to probably have to use a combination of ranged weapons, slowness potions, and just utilize a lot of different things like poisonous arrows and splash potions just to make sure you actually get some range on this guy, because he's going to be a bit of a problem to chase and defeat. But when you slay him, he will drop a Naga trophy and a Naga scales, and then you'll have full access to his arena to mine all the resources completely unguarded. Currently we're inside an oak savanna, and we have located the next structure which we'll be taking a look at, which is the Lich Tower. This is another structure landmark found inside the Twilight Forest, and the very top of this tower you'll find the Twilight Lich, who rules around this structure, and he performs his necromancy sorcery spells. So this is a really cool structure, and this Lich Tower has one large main room and a bunch of smaller rooms which stems off it in towers and spines on side this tower. And inside you'll find a lot of zombies, which you can already see, along with skeletons and swarm spiders. So it's a pretty dangerous structure, obviously like all the other dungeons, with a lot of mob spawners inside too. But there's a lot of different treasure types we can seek inside, and you'll get things like books, brewing supplies, potions, and enchanting equipment, which is very fitting for its magical theme. Now this tower itself, it doesn't really have any main entrance, as you'll see. It's a little bit confusing, so you have to kind of break your way inside the tower from the lower level to actually gain access, which you can actually only do in the mod after you defeat the Naga. So now that I've showed you the Naga, you have to actually go and defeat one of those in the progression system to be able to actually gain entry to this. Otherwise the mod's just going to not let you do it, because it's just going to deny you access to the tower itself, and then you can't defeat the boss. But once it allows you inside, then you can actually complete the content within. But if you haven't defeated the Naga, the blocks will automatically regenerate instantly as soon as you break them, preventing you from moving through it. So let me go inside this thing and kind of give you a little bit of an inspection of its interior. So let me give you a showcase of what's inside, and we'll do a little bit of a tour of the Lich Tower. So inside there's a few different rooms. For an example, we have a few different library rooms, very similar in regards to a normal Minecraft stronghold, where you'll find different cool things inside. I mean, we have enemies like floating books. This enemy is called a death tome, and these guys will drop paper and books, and they'll basically guard the libraries. We have lots of different zombies and more of these death tomes, a lot of different skeletons, pools of lava, and different rooms which all appear to have different contents inside. So there's the standard kind of small mob spawner rooms, which are like mini dungeons inside, and a few rooms that you'd expect to have in a mansion. So there's more than one library, for an example, and you'll find things like paintings on the walls. You'll find even rooms which have cacti in. So whoever used to own this Lich Tower knows how to farm cacti in Minecraft. So there's a lot of different stuff which you'll notice is actually inside this structure, okay? And you'll see huge spiraling staircases which lead all the way to the top of the Lich Tower inside, and the same can also be said for the small towers, which you can also access from the interior too, and you can go inside, see outside the windows, and go to the top of those towers. And there's a lot of different mob spawners on each level, so you have to be wary about not just the mobs which have already spawned here, but potential mobs which could swarm you too, and all the extra towers and rooms that you can kind of get lost in. So even though this isn't a labyrinth, like most towers and structures in the Twilight Forest, the Lich Tower is very confusing to actually get around. But when you reach the very top of the tower, you will see the Twilight Lich, who you've most likely seen before in pictures of the Twilight Forest. So this is the Twilight Lich boss, okay? So if we attack him normally, he's not going to take any damage, okay? Because he has this shield which is around him. This is a boss in the Twilight Forest, which we find in the top layer of a Lich Tower. And this is a tall skeleton creature who has a crown, okay? So this guy is basically kind of like a king of the Liches. Think of this guy as like the Lich King of World of Warcraft. Now, he has this scepter, and he's casting some kind of spell. okay? And this scepter he's wielding has the functionality of all 4 scepters, which are items inside the Twilight Forest, and his scepter, which he drops, is actually a really important item, and you'll also get an achievement when you get his scepter along with 3 others in the Twilight Forest. Now this fight has a few different stages, so he has 3 stages. So the best thing to do would be to probably cover up the entrance for any mobs below so they can't actually walk up and kill me. Okay, so we're going to block any entrances off to the boss from below so we don't have any extra mobs we have to worry about, and then we're going to initiate the boss fight. The first 3 stages of the boss, pretty hard. You need good gear for this, guy. Okay, so he will summon visages of himself which teleport around the room, okay, and all of these visages will attack you, and you can see he's already lost health. He's already got a lower health bar. Okay, so these guys will teleport all around the room and they'll basically shoot you just like a blaze would. So this is a pretty annoying part of the fight. Now this part of the fight, you have to directly damage him by attacking the shields on the boss, okay? And attacking his shields will basically mean the boss will lose health. But the boss also summons explosions around him, and if he's in the radius of his own explosion, he'll actually automatically destroy his own shields. So he's kind of stupid in that regard. But the boss is actually pretty hard to hit because in the second phase of the fight, he'll have usually around 3 zombie minions at a time running around the room, and then he'll teleport every time you hit him and get close, and then he'll start summoning magical attacks at you. So you have to have not only good gear, but things like a sword to deflect the projectiles, and basically enough food, especially golden apples, since I have an abundance here, to actually fight him. Now he's dropped down, so this makes it almost impossible to defeat him if he teleports. But I've just defeated him quickly because he was in a bad spot, and you'll see he's dropped some pretty important items. So he drops a fully enchanted set of gold armor with some amazing stats on, bear in mind, and a Lich trophy, and the Scepter of Fortification, which has 9 charges. So that's one of those scepters I mentioned before, and he'll give you the Bring Out the Dead achievement. Slay the Twilight Lich at the top of his tower and retrieve a scepter which clears poisonous mosquitoes from the swamp. See through blinding darkness of the dark forest curse and resist the snowy forest chill. So when I told you how dark the dark forest was, this scepter will aid with that, and it will help you with your lack of vision. So that's also another bonus of what that item gives you. Let's go to the Twilight Swamp next, which is not to be confused with the standard Minecraft swamp biome. So we're now in the Twilight Swamp, which we have use for with this Scepter of Fortification, which we retrieve from the boss. So we can right click on that if you have the problem of having mosquito swarms. But we're now inside the Twilight Swamp. So why is the Twilight Swamp a really nice biome to be in, and why is it so important? Well, let's move on to the whole fact that you can find these huge mounds which spawn inside the swamps, and these are also very spherical, so it's very easy to tell that these are man-made. And these mounds indicate that you're nearby a labyrinth. So inside the swamp labyrinth, we can go down and descend into the labyrinth. So this is based upon Greek mythology, and you've guessed it, inside the labyrinth you will be able to go through a maze, which is extremely confusing to actually navigate around, which is usually why you realize you're in a labyrinth. And this is basically filled with a few different mobs inside, mainly insects, and sometimes flooded rooms with swamp water, special slimes, and you have to basically kind of find your way around and navigate around this labyrinth, okay? And basically find your way to the center. Now these are mainly found in swamps, but sometimes you can find them under clearings in the forest. So basically you have to go around and try and find your way around, and some rooms can be confusing because you'll find like lava pools and you'll think you've got somewhere but you haven't, okay? And obviously in your case you don't have creative like me. And each labyrinth has 2 levels, and each level of the labyrinth has some pretty unique features, okay? So the first level is basically found through the ruin which we found, and this is all built out of what's called maze stone. So all of these special blocks nearby are called maze stone. So if you're wondering what this thing's built out of, that's basically it, okay? And you'll find all of these areas with special water and streams on. Obviously, Usually you won't be able to break these. It's basically just indicating there's a dead end here. I'm putting torches down so I know which areas of the labyrinth I've already been through, and that kind of makes me get less lost as we go through, because I realize there's a completely new route which I can go through each time, which I haven't yet explored. And inside the labyrinth, when you get to the right position, which you've not yet explored, you'll come across the Minotaur. Now, personally, in my opinion, what makes these guys so dangerous is because they don't actually have a boss health bar. They have a pretty powerful weapon, which is a golden axe for a start, but since they don't have a boss health bar, you can only indicate that they're nearby by footsteps or the cow sound when they moo. So it means that these guys can take you by surprise when we go around one of the halls inside the labyrinth. And these spawn via a Minotaur spawner inside the labyrinth, and it's usually in a room with 4 big pillars, okay? But you'll usually find them just lingering about. Now, this guy can walk all the way through the labyrinth, so you can find him at any point inside in the tunnel, but he doesn't really wander around too much. I mean, he's standing pretty still, okay? But that would obviously change if he aggroed onto us. Now, these guys have 2 different attacks, and unfortunately, since he's not a boss, I can't see his health bar per se, but he'll drop things like this raw meat, which is basically a food item, okay? And sometimes a more rarer drop, this golden axe, okay, which does 7 damage, and it does extra damage when you're actually charging. So if you sprint and then hit a mob, you basically do increase damage when you hit them. Now, back inside the Dark Forest, you can find a place called a Goblin Stronghold, and you'll indicate where this is when you stumble upon a series of bricks and stone bricks, which makes this underground chasm structure, okay? And this goes under the floor in the Dark Forest, and you can see it from the above lair when you're wandering around beneath the trees. So this is pretty hard to see just because the forest is really dark, but when you go underneath, you'll see that there's basically kind of like another maze, a little bit like a labyrinth, which we can go through, and then we can explore inside this compound. And if you go to the right place and you find the main entrance, you'll see that it brings you down into a set of stairs, and then we can go inside the main structure. Now, inside here, this is basically a structure where you'll find some mobs inside. So usually when you're playing in survival mode, you'll be exploring and you'll find a series of different mobs inside. Now, there's a few different entryways. You can see each different corridor leads to a different set of stairs from above, and they all lead into this main room down here. Now, this structure is where you'll obtain armor shards in the mod, which you use to create knightly tools. So if you've seen this set in the creative inventory called Knight Metal, this is where you find the armor shards to actually create this, okay? So if you want to create this, this is how you'll do it, by finding this structure. Now, this structure is unique because there'll be a few different unique mobs inside here. So I'm going to spawn a few of them just to show you what they look like. So these mobs strictly spawn in this structure only. So you'll find 4 different mobs. The helmet crab, which looks like this. It's basically just a cute little crab with the knight helmet on, which you can actually make for yourself. Then there's the goblin knight itself, which makes these kind of sinister, cheeky laughing sounds. And these guys are pretty tall, taller than I'd expect a goblin to be. Then the Twilight Phantoms, which are basically ghosts, and these guys are dangerous particularly because they can actually go through blocks and get bigger, and they have absolutely massive swords, so I wouldn't really be happy to stumble upon these guys. And then also the Block and Chain Goblins. So these guys have basically a rotating metal head which kind of goes around, and it makes them pretty dangerous. Now, to enter the stronghold itself, you actually have to get through a specialized door, which is where a trophy pedestal is. And if you're wondering how to do this, you basically put a Hydra trophy on this, and when you put the Hydra trophy on for the progression system, it'll break open the entrance, and then we can enter the real structure down below, okay? So you won't find any mobs usually in the above ground where we were before. You'll have to actually put the Hydra trophy down, and then you can enter the real Goblin Stronghold. And inside here, you'll find things like anvils, you'll find stairs into deeper rooms in the lower levels, and it's basically like a vanilla Minecraft stronghold, but far more dangerous because there's so many countless levels in here in comparison to it. And inside you'll find loot, and you'll find some pretty interesting blocks. So you'll find underbrick, cracked underbrick, and mossy underbrick, and different stone brick variations inside here. So this is a pretty interesting structure, which is quite dangerous, but the chests inside are particularly very rare in terms of the loot, which is really valuable to find. So this is a really good structure to find, but it may be a little bit challenging, so you'll need some pretty high-tech loot to actually explore this. Ooh, we're dropping from the sky down through the clouds, and we've dropped into none other than the snowy forest. So this is the snowy forest, which is a very chilling biome, and sometimes you'll actually fall through the snow down into the ground below, so you need to be careful. But these are usually located on the brink of glaciers. So usually glaciers where you find the Aurora palaces, just like this one you may be able to see, they're usually found bordering onside other snowy biomes, just like the snowy forest, which is what we're seeming to be wanting to locate in this part of the video. And snowy forests are important because they're actually home to Yeti lairs. And Yeti lairs are in these huge, large square hills, which are cross-shaped hills that are based inside snowy forests with ice-packed floors. And we've luckily come into one of these, and when you enter, there's large icy spikes coming from the ceiling. Now inside you'll find normal Yetis, and you'll find a ton of them in abundance. Okay, so we can see tons of these normal Yetis inside, but these Yetis aren't actually the scary thing, because when we go up to this mob spawner, you're going to find the Alpha Yeti himself. Okay, Alpha Yetis are the boss versions of these Yetis, which are part of the progression system in the game. So defeating these are pretty important, but it's not the Yeti himself that's the tough part. It's the fact that he's surrounded by all these hundreds of normal Yetis, which are going to come to his aid and basically help to defeat you. So you need to be careful of just how many of these minions this guy has. Now this guy will actually throw ice blocks towards the player, and he has a few different attacks which make him particularly dangerous. But when you kill him, he'll give you 2 achievements. These are Alpha Fur. Line your garments with a soft fur from the Alpha Yeti, keeping you safe from the cold of the biome. Then also Clear Skies. Defeat the Snow Queen atop the Aurora Palace. Now this will actually be given when you defeat the Snow Queen, obviously, but since I've already defeated her because I disabled the progression system, I only just got it now. The reason for that is because usually in the Twilight Forest you have to actually defeat the Alpha Yeti before you're allowed to go and defeat the Snow Queen. So obviously there's a series of things you have to do in order in the mod. But this guy will drop ice bombs and Alpha Yeti fur. So the final thing which I'll be covering in this Twilight Forest mod showcase is the final castle. This castle is a structure which sits on a mesa of dead rock, which is protected below by the Thornlands biome, which is basically a huge thorny wall which hurts you and protects the castle from entry. Okay, so this is constructed mainly of these huge white castle bricks with glowing runes on the side of each of these towers, just like you can see in a various number of different colours with these huge portal rune like doors around. You'll see different mobs around here, like these strange mobs protecting the doors and blazers which spawn on top of the bridges. And these structures look really amazing. As you can see, it doesn't really look like anything you'd see before. This castle is basically a collection of different towers which also dot around the main keep, which is centered in the middle of the castle. This is called the Central Keep. And a lot of these different towers around them are actually overrun and entangled in thorns, so it really makes for a great structure. This structure is absolutely huge, and I can't imagine how long it took them to build this. Now inside here you'll find a few different enemies. For example, the castle chambers have armored giants, kobolds, adherents, Harbinger cubes, which you've seen around, and Enderman inside. So there's a few different mob types which you can see inside the castle. And each chamber and tower of this castle has at least one magic doorway that disappears when right clicked and reappears a short time later. So as you can see, this castle looks really awesome. And there's so many structures in the Twilight Forest, but I think this one really has to take the winning prize for how it looks. Now I'm going to go through this doorway, which I probably shouldn't, and show you the inside. As you can see, we're now inside of the castle, okay? And we can already see Endermen around here, and these wolf-like enemies, which are those kobolds, which I talked about before, which you may have seen before in the Lich Tower. But these are kobolds, and as you can see, we're now inside the structure. And this is the shield which leads into the basement. So we can now head down into the basement of the castle and show you what lingers down below in the dark. This is also another place that you should definitely bring torches to, because there's so much to explore beneath it. So let's wander down into the basement, which is surrounded by this rock, which is called Dead Rock. So when we were talking about the Mesa of Dead Rock before, this is Dead Rock, okay? And we are now in the basement, which is an area which is based from the dead rock blocks and contains several large chambers which are constructed out of these coloured rune blocks with force fields of similar colours around them. And once we go through these, we can access the chambers. And there's 3 levels of basements here with stairs, and many mobs called adherents will patrol these areas as we're exploring them, with more of them being present on each level of the basement. So we can put torches around here and kind of show you what these look like. There's not really too much inside of these, although this is the adherent mob, so if you wonder what they look like, they're basically hovering, glowing rune ghosts. So we can continue to explore, and sometimes there's openings and crevices in the wall which lets you reach the different areas. And you can see we have these huge cubes inside, and there's so much that lingers below inside the basement. This structure is far bigger than I expected, and if we break through a few of the different force fields, those let us go into the further rooms and then descend down into the other different stories. So the deeper we go, the more mobs you'll find and the more challenge there actually is. And for some reason, there's this huge vine root from the outside here, but as we go across into the rest of this basement floor, you'll see we already have more mobs just like we anticipated. This is pretty dangerous just generally as a level, and it's also pretty hard to survive because there's so many enemies down here, and you could also fall down if you don't go into the right place. And this has been the Twilight Forest mod showcase, so if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe, and the mod download link will be in the description down below. Feel free to become a channel member if you want to support me uploading videos like this every single day. You can press the join button below and I will give you my Minecraft mods in return for supporting the channel, and you can also join the modded server to play with everyone on the channel as soon as you become a member. I update the server as frequently as I can, and I try to add different updates to my mods whenever I have time. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you next time.